And we're back. Welcome to my preview and predictions for the FA Cup 5th round / last 16. Now, before we get into today's video, I have an important message to say to you all. You guys have been asking an awful lot recently, when am I going to start doing some of the other major leagues? Well, I've put a poll up on the community page right now where you can have your say on which of the other leagues you would like me to start doing predictions on. That poll is up and available, like I say, on the community page with a link to that available at the top of your screen right now. As always, you guys decide the future of this channel, so let me know on that community post which of the 4 other major leagues you would love to see me covering on this channel. As for the FA Cup, of course, we've got matches taking place all over the course of this weekend, starting off with a match taking place tonight as well. So before we get into it, if you haven't done so already, please do consider dropping a like on this video. And if you are new around here, please do consider subscribing with notifications turned on, because next week we are returning back to European football once again with separate videos for the Champions League, Europa League and Europa Conference League knockout stages. As for the matches then, you will see that off the back of round 4, we're on 32 out of 48 results in the FA Cup. Pretty good standing so far in this competition, and 6 correct scores, of which 3 were in the 4th round. Whether or not we'll get 3 more correct in the 5th round remains to be seen, but let's get things started then with the game taking place tonight in the FA Cup. It is Aston Villa, 10th in the Premier League, taking on Cardiff, 19th in the Championship. Now, Aston Villa were able to defeat Spurs in the last round of the FA Cup and then went on a 4-game unbeaten run until that came crashing down with a 4-1 defeat to Crystal Palace in the midweek fixtures in the Premier League. As for Cardiff, they beat Stoke on penalties in the last round and then themselves have gone on an unbeaten run in their last 3 matches, drawing their last 2 and winning against Hull at the in the midweek fixtures themselves. The interesting thing for this one, as always with any of the FA Cup matches, is what we think about team selection. And for me, it is Aston Villa that are the side to keep an eye on when it comes to this fixture. My expectation is they're going to make a whole bunch of changes for this match. Firstly, Emi Martinez went off with an injury against Crystal Palace anyway, so I don't think he's certainly not going to be in goal, and I think he probably wouldn't have played in goal anyway. But the important thing to think about when it comes to Villa is they have a massive Champions League game against Club Brugge in midweek, and it's actually the early kickoff on Tuesday. So I think that's probably why the FA have put this match on tonight, to give Villa as much rest as possible going into their massive Champions League knockout phases. Cardiff, to be fair, have their own massive game. They're playing on Tuesday night as well. They are taking on 3rd place side Burnley in the Championship, which is a massive, massive game for them as well, as they try to avoid relegation, and Burnley are obviously pushing for the automatic promotion. More on them shortly. But from what I've seen of Cardiff over their previous rounds, they have been tending to play their full first team. I think they're still trying to build momentum. They've moved further away from the relegation zone since we last spoke about them on this series. And they're going to look to carry on building. And I think consistency is what they're looking for. So when it comes to injuries and suspensions, obviously we've already mentioned Martinez for Villa. There are no fresh concerns for Cardiff. There are actually no other fresh concerns for Villa. But like I say, with all their defensive issues at the moment, and with a massive game in the Champions League on Tuesday night, I think their defence could be very vulnerable to a potential Cardiff onslaught. With all of that said though, it's still a very strong Premier League team, a Champions League level Premier League team, taking on a Cardiff side that are in the bottom half of the Championship. So my expectation is still that Aston Villa win, but I'm going to go on the side of caution, and I'm just going to go for a 3-1 victory to Aston Villa. It'll be interesting, like I say, especially in those attacking areas, who plays. Will they go for the likes of Ramsey and Rodgers that are more English League experience, saving the likes of Marlon, Rashford and Asensio who have that Champions League experience on Tuesday? We shall see, but ultimately, I still think that Aston Villa will get the victory. On to Saturday, and we start off with 2 early kickoffs on Saturday, and the first of those sees Crystal Palace taking on Millwall. It's a battle of 12th versus 12th, and would you believe it, it's another London derby. And look, the form of these sides is actually pretty exemplary at the moment. Crystal Palace, off the back of beating Aston Villa 4-1, as we've just mentioned in the previous prediction, they have now won 7 of their last 9. And that obviously includes the 2-0 victory over Doncaster in the last run as well. But Let's not overlook Millwall's achievements over the last few weeks as well. They beat Leeds in the last round. They won away at Leeds United, currently top of the Championship. They beat them in the last round away, a 2-0 victory with Aziz getting both of the goals in that game. And since then, they are unbeaten as well, with the exception of a 5-1 defeat to Plymouth, which we will also get to shortly. But they are playing some very good football at the moment. Unbeaten, like I say, in their last 3 matches. They're scoring goals. They have no fresh concerns coming into this one as well. But the only problem that I think is that, again, we've spoken about it time and time again. Oliver Glasner, in every single match, plays his strongest team. Like I say, they beat Doncaster in the last round, Crystal Palace. And other than swapping their goalkeeper, it was their full first team. I absolutely love that. It's good to see the FA Cup getting the respect it reserves from some of these top-level Premier League sides, because it doesn't always happen, but Oliver Glasner is someone that is going to do that. And ultimately, a fully fit Crystal Palace team, off the back of the result that they had against Aston Villa in midweek, even though Millwall are playing well at the moment, even though I expect Millwall to play their full first team as well, the quality of the Premier League side should shine through in the end. And I'm going for a 2-0 victory to Crystal Palace. It could end up being more if they're really on it, but again, Crystal Palace obviously have a Premier League game coming up next week as well, so maybe it'll be a case where they take the lead and then take the likes of Mateta and Eze off, etc. But we'll see. Crystal Palace, though, should be winning this one. The other early kickoff on Saturday sees Preston North End taking on Burnley. And, well, do I just put the nil next to Preston now, or shall we wait till the end of the prediction? Obviously, for those of you who don't know, Burnley have only conceded 1 goal in all competitions since Christmas Day. You are talking now over 2 months of football, and Burnley have only conceded 1 goal. And that was in their FA Cup victory against Reading, where they changed their entire team. In the Championship, I believe it's now 12 matches since they conceded a goal, and that does include a game against Preston along the way as well. However, it should be noted that in that game against Preston, which actually took place only 2 weeks ago, that match ended 0-0. So let's show a little bit of respect to Preston here. I think a lot of people are just looking at this fixture and saying, well, Burnley will probably win. They know the record about the clean sheets. They see where they are in the Championship table and probably just assume that Burnley are going to win this match. Well, let's think about this a little bit more logically than that. 2 weeks ago, Preston have just drawn 0-0 with Burnley. That was Burnley's first team. In the last round of the FA Cup, when they beat Southampton 1-0, they still changed their entire team, give or take maybe 2 or 3 players. Whereas Preston, in their last round victory against Coventry, they played their full first team. So let's bear that in mind. They've just drawn 0-0 with Burnley's first team. They're now coming up against Burnley, in theory, they're coming up against Burnley's second string team. We'll see. They might change it, but as we've already mentioned, Burnley are playing Cardiff in midweek, and they're the side currently outside the automatic promotion spots. So that's their priority. That's more important to them than winning this FA Cup match. And that leaves the door open for Preston to get the result in this match. But we shall see. As again, even with their reserve side, they still got that clean sheet against Southampton. They only conceded 1 against Reading, and of course still won that match. So Burnley are a very strong squad. They're very defensively resilient, and I do think it's going to be a very, very tough game for Preston to get the result, despite all the things that I've said. So for me, the safest way of doing this is to cover all of my bases by saying in 90 minutes, I'm going for yet another 0-0 draw. But beyond the 90-minute mark in extra time and penalties, I will then go for Preston to get the ultimate victory. We shall see, though. If Burnley play their first team, obviously more chance of them getting the result either in 90 minutes or beyond. But I'm actually backing Preston to end up with the victory in the end. Moving on then, we have some mid-of-the-day kickoffs, shall we say, and it is an all-Premier League affair. Somehow, for the first time in these predictions, it is Bournemouth taking on Wolves, and, well, speaking of sides that met 2 weeks ago, these sides also met 2 weeks ago, and again, at the same ground. Same as Preston and Burnley met at Deepdale 2 weeks ago, Bournemouth and Wolves met at the Vitality Stadium just a couple of weeks ago, and on that occasion, it was a 1-0 victory to Wolves. Okay, Zabrani was sent off in that fixture, which obviously changed the entire dynamic of the match, but as I mentioned in my predictions last week, going into the Premier League predictions, Wolves were actually the better team in that first half prior to the red card, and obviously once Bournemouth had Zabrani sent off, it was much easier for Wolves to then finish the job and obviously keep them out. However, there's actually not a lot to split between these two sides over the last few weeks. Obviously, Wolves did beat Bournemouth 1-0 a couple of weeks ago, but both sides won in round 4 by a margin of 2-0. Bournemouth won at Everton, Wolves won at Blackburn. Both sides have lost in the midweek fixtures by a scoreline of 2-1. Bournemouth at Brighton, Wolves critically at home to Fulham. Both sides, as proven in their previous rounds, will be expected to be playing their full first teams coming into this, with the exception of the goalkeepers changing on both accounts. And neither of these sides actually have any fresh injury or suspension concerns coming into this match. However, Bournemouth will, ironically, have Zabrani back and available for this match after he got sent off against Wolves 2 weeks ago. So their defensive line is going to be back to what it normally is. Obviously, they did struggle without him against Brighton at the weekend. And to be honest, given the fact that this is just 2 weeks after I made my initial prediction, my thoughts on this game haven't really changed. So I'm just going to go for the exact same prediction that I went for 2 weeks ago in the Premier League and go for 3-2 to Bournemouth, because I do think it'll be that sort of game. It'll be open, there'll be chances, both teams will score goals, but ultimately I think Bournemouth have got that little bit of extra quality to just about get the result in the end. But we'll see. Obviously the red card did make a massive difference to the overall result with it being 1-0, but that's football, anything can happen. That's why we love these predictions, but I'm still going to go for the Bournemouth victory. Final game on Saturday then, and the reward for Plymouth Argyle for beating currently the best team in the country is to play the side that Liverpool replaced as the best side in the country, and that is of course Manchester City, who have managed to sneak themselves back into the Champions League places. As you can see there, they are now 4th in the Premier League, but for Plymouth, they're no longer bottom of the Championship because they used that momentum off the back of the Liverpool game to beat Millwall 5-1, as we've already mentioned, and then go on a little bit of a mini run. They've had a couple of draws in there, but actually they've not won any of their last 3. So it's a little bit of a concern for them heading to the Etihad with not the best form. But as we know, City are a little bit inconsistent at the moment as well. I know I got a lot of stick for saying how bad City are playing in my last video, but look, you've got to take things at face value. They got smashed by Arsenal, then played really well against Newcastle, then got outplayed by Real Madrid twice, and got outplayed by Liverpool, but in midweek were absolutely phenomenal against Spurs. Yes, they probably conceded 1 or 2 more chances than they would have liked, but crucially for them, it's another clean sheet. They're playing some relatively good football again. They're scoring goals. Haaland's back, scored 1, in my opinion, robbed of a second. So actually, that's a really good performance from Manchester City as well. And the real worry for Plymouth is Man City are out of all the other competitions. Like, let's not get it twisted. They're not going to catch Liverpool, so they're not going to win the Premier League. They're out of the League Cup because the League Cup final is Liverpool against Newcastle. And they're out of the Champions League. So if Manchester City want silverware this season, this is where it's going to be. They haven't got that midweek fixture because they're out of the Champions League. Their next game is a massive game against Nottingham Forest in the race for the top 4. Let's not forget about that as well. But that's going to be at the end of next week. So they can actually play their full first team in this match against Plymouth. And I think if they do, as good as Plymouth were against Liverpool, that was Liverpool's reserves. And we'll see. I would still expect Pep to make some changes, but I don't think he's going to make as many as people are suggesting. In terms of injuries and suspensions, once again, none for either side from their previous fixture. So we'll just have to take it on face value. Can Plymouth's incredible January signings that did the job at did the job at home to Liverpool now go to the Etihad and get the result against City? I don't think so. I'm just going to go for 2-0. It could be way, way more if City just play to their absolute best. My worry is I just don't see where Plymouth score. Like, you look at the clean sheet against Newcastle, you look at the clean sheet against Spurs. I struggle to see, against the City side that's going to absolutely dominate the ball here, I really struggle to see where Plymouth score. Can they keep it at 0-0 all the way to penalties? I don't think so. So I'm going for City. I'm only going to go for 2-0. Like I say, it may end up being a lot more if Pep does play his full first team, but we'll see. For me, though, be really, really surprised if it isn't a Manchester City win. On to Sunday then, and it is yet another all-Premier League affair. It is Newcastle taking on Brighton, and well, the recent run of these two sides mean this is a much tougher fixture to call. Newcastle, of course, almost crashed out to Birmingham in round 4. An incredible 3-2 match, that one. Brighton, of course, eased past Chelsea. Yes, the result was 2-1, but it was a clumsy own goal and an absolute dominance. And since then, it's been 3 wins in a row in the league for Brighton as well. Obviously 4 in total if you include that FA Cup game. For Newcastle, it's just been the most flip-flopping terms of form you've probably ever seen. And it's even happening within matches. We said it ourselves. They go and beat Arsenal in the League Cup. Phenomenal performance. They get hammered by City. They have a really good performance against Nottingham Forest for 20 minutes. And they nearly let Forest come all the way back and get the draw. And then against Liverpool, they actually play really well again. But ultimately, it's not enough. And they didn't score against Liverpool because Alexander Isak was injured. And as things stand, as I'm recording this video, there is no update on whether or not Isak is going to be available for this match. In my opinion, Eddie Howe will not risk him with the League Cup final next week. So I would be very surprised to see Alexander Isak up front in this match. As for Brighton, of course, they themselves have no injury concerns, and they could even have the likes of Joel Veltman and potentially Lewis Dunk back for this match as well. It's incredible that we're 6 games into this prediction video, and Isak is the only sort of fresh injury concern we've had to talk about so far, which I guess is testament to how well these sides are doing in terms of the fitness of their players at the moment. But Brighton's recent run has actually taken them only 1 point behind Newcastle in the Premier League. They're playing some very good football. They also won at St James's Park in the Premier League earlier on this season as well. It was a 1-0 victory for them. So I actually think with Newcastle's priority probably leaning more towards that League Cup final rather than this FA Cup run, and with their chances of potentially getting into Europe in the Premier League as well. Yes, they're not playing a Premier League game next week because of the League Cup final, but I think Newcastle are the side much more likely to make changes for this fixture, and I think Brighton will capitalise with their second win at St James's Park, and I'm going for a 2-1 win to Brighton. Other game on Sunday sees my club, of course, Manchester United taking on Fulham. Manchester United won 2-1 in round 4 against Leicester, and of course, in the controversial circumstances with Harry Maguire being offside. For Fulham, it was another 2-1 victory for them. Their reserves went to Wigan and won 2-1. And obviously, like I say, they did play their reserves. And the likelihood is that Marco Silva could make changes for this one as well. In terms of their recent form, since that, Manchester United have won 1, drawn 1 and lost 1. It's Fulham that have won 2 and lost 1. So it's actually Fulham that come into this with slightly better form. It's also worth noting that Fulham have won all of their last 4 away matches, which is an incredible run of form away from home for them, whereas Manchester United have lost 2 of their last 5 at home, winning the other 3. So not a lot to split between them, and there hasn't been a lot to split between them in terms of the matches they've played this season either. They've already played both of their Premier League matches. On the opening day of the Premier League season, United won 1-0 at Old Trafford, and just a few weeks ago, Manchester United also won 1-0 at Craven Cottage. However, I do think there is a lot more chance that Fulham are going to be getting themselves at least 1 goal in this match. United defensively over the last few weeks haven't been that great. Okay, they went down to 10 men against Ipswich, sat in really deep, and that is how they were able to keep Ipswich out for the second half. The consequence of having to go down to 10 men means that Patrick Dorgu is going to be unavailable for this match due to suspension. And for Marco Silva's side, again, no fresh injury concerns, but actually we could see the likes of Emil Smith-Rowe and Tom Cairney back in and available for them. Now, when they played Wolves in midweek, they actually changed their system. They went to a 3-back to counter Wolves' 3-back. So my expectation is that Fulham will do the same thing here, and I just think it could end up with the two sides cancelling each other out. I don't really want to pick a favourite here because I really don't think there is one. So I'm just going to go for a 1-1 draw and then put my bias hat on to say that Manchester United win in extra time or penalties. But let's not forget that incredible game that we had in the FA Cup a couple of years ago where Fulham were by far the better team against Manchester United, then self-imploded, got 2 players sent off and ended up losing. Hopefully, as a United fan, we see something similar again this weekend. And then finally, the Monday night FA Cup match is another all-Premier League affair as Nottingham Forest take on Ipswich. Both sides have had a real poor run of form since their victories in the FA Cup 4th round. Forest, of course, had to take penalties to get their victory away at Exeter, whereas Ipswich were actually quite comfortable victors over Coventry in the last round. But since then, both sides have drawn 1 and lost the other 2 in the Premier League, which means Forest are now hanging on the edge of the Champions League places. Okay, good 0-0 draw with Arsenal in midweek. Ipswich have now dropped off behind Wolves in the race for survival and look like they are going to be joining their fellow Championship sides, Southampton and Leicester, in the return drop to the Championship. But this is a free hit for them. My expectation is that both sides, again, will make changes. You've got to look at how they've done in the previous rounds, and on both occasions, Forest and Ipswich have near enough changed their entire starting 11. Will that change with this now being an all-Premier League affair? Obviously, that remains to be seen. I can only look at what they've done in previous rounds and say to you guys that so far, both sides have been changing their entire teams. But when you look at that, you've then got to look at the performances as well. As we've just said, Forest's reserves needed extra time and penalties to beat a side struggling in League One at the moment. Ipswich's reserves absolutely hammered Coventry away from home, who are doing pretty well in the Championship. So there is definitely a chance of me to sit here and say that actually, if both sides do make wholesale changes, Ipswich might actually be the favourites for this match. However, Forest are at home. Forest did win the league fixture 1-0 earlier on this season. Again, of course, that was first team versus first team. But surely, even with Forest's priority to get into the Champions League, this should be a match that they would win if they do play their first team. And obviously, neither side have a midweek fixture to worry about because neither side are in Europe at the moment. So I'm still going to go for Forest. But again, take it with a pinch of salt. If it is reserves against reserves, Ipswich's chances of getting the result here go way, way up. So I'm going to end my 5th round predictions with a 2-1 victory to Nottingham Forest, and we will see what happens. As always, let me know all your thoughts down in the comment section below. Let me know anything you think I've missed in terms of the team selections. Like I said, as far as I can tell, not many injuries or suspensions for any of these sides coming into this FA Cup. So if you think I've missed anything, let me know down in the comment section below. Don't forget to head over to the community page and vote on which league you would like to see introduced to the channel over the course of the next couple of months. Thank you very much for watching once again. I'll see you very soon.